I would just invite anybody, member, former member alike, to do this journey. Go on this journey and find people who mean a lot to you and do the soul work necessary to dig down deep into what you feel is right and true. Dig down deep into that, and at the same time open your arms wide and don't be afraid. There's no need to be afraid of this. I'm not leaving these 9 conversations like, oh my goodness, I don't have a testimony anymore because look at these beautiful people, and if they don't have a testimony, then maybe I shouldn't either. That's not what happened. I was actually able to make it through 9 conversations, and it's like 9, right? It's 9, but it's possible for you as a former member to stay a former member if that's what you're hoping for, and to also open your heart and listen to members, and for members to stay a member, active, faithful, believing member, and also utilize Christ's atonement and amazing power to open your heart and hear.
What was so hard is I didn't understand that some people didn't want to talk about this with me or just needed to have a boundary there. And what was so difficult is I wanted to share with people what I was learning, feeling like they would want to talk about this too, because it's so interesting to me and these questions are so important to me. And what I know now is that when you attack someone's identity, so our identity wrapped around our community, our beliefs, our meaning, our purpose, when you are going through information that is attacking that in some way, it's the ego's job to defend that. And people will put up a wall because they're trying to protect. I didn't understand why people who were so close to me, family members, people who genuinely loved me, essentially put a boundary with me and shut me down, just completely shut me down. And that was incredibly painful at the time because it felt like every day these people are going to church saying that they're going to mourn with those that mourn and comfort those who stand in need of comfort. And here I am, and I am struggling. And every single person in my family, my bishop, everyone I could possibly turn to because they're protecting their own identity.
Hello and welcome back to the Why I Say podcast for another listen in episode. And I say another, but actually this is number 9 of our limited series, the very end, the capstone of this whole project so far. And I have to say that this has changed me. It has given me perspective in so many aspects of my life and has helped me realize some blind spots that I've had in my approach to ministering to others, to thinking of others, judging others. I realize I have a lot of work to do, and I'm also proud of how far I've come in just these short 8 and then hopefully this 9th episode. Before we begin, just to let everybody know what this is, if you're new, welcome to the last one. I encourage you to go back to the first and start at the beginning. But what this is just a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints sitting down with people who have left, former members, to ask them what their experience was in leaving the gospel. I didn't trust myself really to get into doctrinal debates about things. That's not really the point of this right now. What I really wanted to do was teach myself to feel empathy and sympathy and set aside just for this conversation to just take off the filters of Lynzi Clyde and her experience and just hear somebody and understand where they're coming from. And every time we start, I try and do a scripture or a thought before just to set the intention for myself and for our member listeners who are here. And today, and for this last one, we've got 2 Nephi chapter 4, verse 30. And as I was thinking about the end of this small series and what I felt and what I wanted to feel, this is what came to mind. It says, "Rejoice, O my heart, and cry unto the Lord, and say, O Lord, I will praise thee forever. Yea, my soul will rejoice in thee, my God, and the rock of my salvation." And although our relationships in our lives, friends, family, spouses might change, the dynamics of that can change and change just based on the choices that we choose. I think that we all can lean on Jesus Christ and rejoice in him and have so much faith in that God of ours, that he can redeem our souls and we can have joy even when we have bumpy relationships that mean a lot to us and they're going through a rough patch, and we can rely on our Savior. So, okay, that's what I wanted to begin with. And now, after my long preamble, I would love to introduce our guest we have today, Britt Hartley. Britt, welcome to the podcast.
Happy to be here and love the goals of this show. There's a lot of debates and hurt feelings on both sides when we talk about members of the church and post members in communication. And so you even just having a platform where people can feel seen and heard is just fantastic. And I just wanted to support that.
Yeah, thank you. It means a lot. Listeners, what we're going to do is some rapid fire get to know you questions for Britt first. And then after that, we'll move into the discussion questions, which revolve around the beginning of her faith transition and into what it's like right now. So Britt, are you ready for the rapid fires?
Sure, and I forgot to look at these. So these are going to be true off the top of my head questions.
Perfect. Well, this first one should be easy. Sometimes we slip up on this, but Britt, how old are you?
I'm 39. I turned 40 this year.
So fun. Do you have any nicknames?
Britster is a nickname that I have in my family.
What state do you live in?
I live in Idaho.
What is your favorite food?
Probably tacos.
Current hobby?
TikToking.
Nice. What is a controversial opinion that you hold? Something light, like everybody loves Crocs, but you hate them.
I don't like country music under any circumstances.
In Idaho, probably really
in
controversial.
Idaho, it's very rough.
And last two, what is your biggest dream?
Right now for this year, I really want to go on Rainn Wilson's podcast, Soul Boom. I'm seeing if I can make that happen this year.
Amazing. And then this last one is, what is something about you that is the same now as it was when you were in high school?
Asking big questions.
Beautiful. Okay, and so we're going to ask you some big questions today. And the first one is, tell us your Latter-day Saint origin story. Did you grow up in the church? Was your family active, not active, converts, etc.?
Yeah, I grew up in the church and really had a happy LDS childhood. And both my parents were active and didn't really have concerns or things like cognitive dissonance until I became a teenager. So my early childhood, I really was a happy little girl and have a lot of good memories being raised in a community like that. And started to have issues with things like cognitive dissonance and big questions when I was a teenager. That ended up with me being kicked out of my home, and then really started to study deeper questions. Ended up going to BYU Idaho, and I would say that I was nuanced by the time I was about 16, and then later on kind of had more of a bigger faith transition.
And if it's not too personal, can you get into being kicked out of your home? I mean, from what you said, it sounds like you were kicked out because of the questions that you had. Am I understanding that correctly?
I mean, at base level, I was asking some tough questions, but because I wasn't really getting any answers other than just be obedient, that kind of came out then in me as rebellion, because I just couldn't handle that no one would take my questions seriously and people would just tell me to be obedient. And I was told that maybe sometimes that I had, spirit of Satan or, things like that, things that people can think when you're asking questions that people don't like to address. So that came out in me rather than just going to my parents and saying I'm experiencing cognitive dissonance, which is words that I learned later. It really just came out in rebellion. So eventually it was the rebellion itself where my parents decided that I wasn't being a good influence for my brothers at home and decided to remove me from the home.
What kind of impact did that have on you at such a young age?
At the time, it was quite traumatic. Now, these wounds have completely healed for me. I have fantastic relationships with both my parents. One of my parents is still active, one is not. And just these wounds just feel totally healed to me to even talk about. But at the time, it was quite traumatic, and it really dove me in deeper into wanting to know, especially when my life felt chaotic. I really wanted to know what is part of the campus. History teachers have their own kind of unique brand of how they practice their faith, and really enjoyed my time there, and then continued to even study theology after BYU Idaho and have a master's degree now in theology. So I take these questions really seriously.
Yeah, definitely. So you said you enjoyed your time at BYU and then BYU-I, and then you said you had a faith, like more of a faith transition after that. Can you tell us where you went from there?
Yeah, so it was when I had my first child, and it was the first time where I was home instead of working. I was a history teacher. And it was the first time that I was home to be able to take things off of my shelf and actually have the time to look at them seriously. This would be now 15 years ago. So this is before podcasts, before the church essays. And I was reading microfilm, trying to figure out Joseph Smith's polygamy by myself at 2 a.m. with a newborn, because it was the first time that I was home. And all the things that I had kind of accumulated on my shelf for years, that shelf came kind of crashing down for me. And it was devastating to me at the time, because at the time, the very things that I was bringing up are now common knowledge in church essays. But 15 years ago, I was really seen as a pariah in my family and in my ward, and that was really devastating to me when that information is now readily available, but nobody believed me back then. So that was very difficult at the time.
Yeah, I'm sure. It's really interesting, the shift that actually has happened. And the episode just previous, he started his journey in 2008. Same thing. It's just like, getting into the archives where most people weren't even thinking to go, didn't even realize they could have access to, and had no one to talk about it with. Same thing, family just kind of immediately shut off, walls up. Yeah, and it just sounds really painful. I can't imagine going through that especially in a time like that.
So what I did was, I still believed in God at the time, and so the shift that I made then was, maybe this church isn't the one true church in the way that I believed, but I still believed in God, and I still believed that there was aspects of this church that help people to develop a relationship with God and Jesus. And so I actually was a seminary teacher, a paid seminary teacher here in Idaho, even after my faith transition, which confuses people, but really I've always wanted to be doing healthy spirituality. It's so meaningful to me. And so I was a seminary teacher even without believing that it was the one true church, because I was trying to use aspects of this particular kind of doctrine and church to be able to help people have a more direct and healthy relationship with the sacred and the good. And eventually, though, as I went into my doctorate program in theology, that's when I lost my faith in God. And so being a seminary teacher was no longer really appropriate for me. But I didn't stomp out of the church angry. I still participated. I was in a mixed faith marriage. I was still Young Women's president. I was still a seminary teacher. So I really tried as best I could to navigate my place in this community that I feel so strongly about. But by the end of my time in my kind of local ward, I wasn't allowed to pray. I wasn't allowed to speak. Lots of ostracized, mean comments and rude things said to me, people not allowing their kids to play with my kids. And eventually I just knew that this community was no longer a community for me and no longer a community for my children. But when people hear me today, when I have critiques of this religion in particular, most people don't know that I tried for many, many years to be able to stay and felt like I was not able to do that in a healthy way.
So two things. First of all, you said you were in a mixed faith marriage. So was it a mixed faith marriage all along? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so my husband was active for about 5 or 6 years longer than I was. So I was still attending church with him and still quite active, even though my beliefs were quite nuanced at that point. And nuanced enough that I wouldn't have said that I believed that it was the one true church. I probably wouldn't have said that then, but still participating in all the beautiful things that this church has to offer.
And then, so you said your husband was still participating 6 or 7. Is he fully out of the church now? Where's he at?
Yeah, he's out of the church now, and we have 4 children, and we're still married, and we've rebuilt. It was scary at first, but we've rebuilt our lives outside of the church. And, I just have to say that we're really thriving, being able to rebuild outside of the church the things that were healthy, like family dinners and gathering before a meal and saying something. We don't say a prayer, we say a quote or something different. Sunday mornings, we do our own family church. So there's a lot of things that I've implemented that I got from my upbringing that I still have in my family system today, but it's more authentic to my beliefs, and it doesn't require as much mental gymnastics, and it's just a lot healthier of a spiritual life for my family system now.
So, and that leads me into my second question of what you were mentioning before, is that you said when you started your doctorate program, you lost your belief in God altogether, but it sounds like you're still trying to help with spirituality. Tell me about what happened during your doctorate program and how that's influencing you now as a mom and as a wife
Yeah,
and
one of the
person.
most damaging things to my testimony was when you go to theology school and eventually you get so much knowledge about how different societies create gods and how their gods change over time and the similarities and the differences and why the Old Testament God is like this and the New Testament God is like that and the societal changes. And eventually it got to the point where I had this shift where I realized that God wasn't the one that created us, in my opinion. We're the ones who create God. And so that was a very painful shift in theology school. I did not want to lose my faith in God. I was in theology school to get closer to God. I didn't want to lose my faith in God. I lost a lot when I lost my faith in God. But the beautiful thing about spending 20 years in the field of religion and spirituality and philosophy and theology is there's so many beautiful tools for things like awe and transcendence and community and love and contemplation and ritual and awe and all of these things. And we have science now showing these things are good for you. And so now my job as a spiritual director, I did a 2-year program in spiritual direction after my theology degree. I want everyone to have access to the tools that religion provides that scientifically are going to make your life better. So now I'm a spiritual director. I have a full-time client list and I just help people wherever they are in their spiritual journey. And it's something I'm very passionate that I do now. And for some clients, they believe in God and many of my clients do not. And I just try to provide spiritual direction for wherever they are in their journey.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. And that's a really interesting perspective and one that we haven't had on the show yet. So lots to think about. Let me see. Let me look at my questions and just see. Let's go back to what was it like? Do you have any specific examples about what it was like telling your family or your spouse? Maybe let's zoom into, after your first baby. When did you start opening up more about where you were headed, or were you just kind of transparent about this the whole time?
Yeah, at the time, what was so hard, and this is something that I would say the majority of post-Mormons go through. What was so hard is I didn't understand that some people didn't want to talk about this with me or just needed to have a boundary there. And what was so difficult is I wanted to share with people what I was learning, feeling like they would want to talk about this too, because it's so interesting to me and these questions are so important to me. And what I know now is that when you attack someone's identity, so our identity wrapped around our community, our beliefs, our meaning, our purpose, when you are going through information that is attacking that in some way, it's the ego's job to defend that. And people will put up a wall because they're trying to protect. When you have an identity in this religion, it's foundational to your morality and your meaning, your family, your community, everything. And so I didn't understand why people who were so close to me, family members, people who genuinely loved me, essentially put a boundary with me and shut me down, just completely shut me down. And that was incredibly painful at the time because it felt like every day these people are going to church saying that they're going to mourn with those that mourn and comfort those who stand in need of comfort. And here I am, and I am struggling. And every single person in my family, my bishop, everyone I could possibly turn to, because they're protecting their own identity, essentially had to have a wall and shut me down. And that was incredibly painful and very lonely and isolating. I'm more compassionate to that now because I understand why people have to protect those things. And I understand why the ego does what it does in your brain. But at the time, it was just so incredibly lonely that these people promised and we covenanted to each other that we would watch out for each other, that we would sit with each other and mourn with each other. And here was my time. I've given my entire life to the church. I'm a seminary teacher. I'm a young women's president. I have done everything the church asked me to do. And now is my time to mourn. And the entire community, the entire ward, the entire leadership, my entire family on both sides, wall and shut down. And it was such a painful experience that I didn't understand.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Thank you
for that. Was it the same with your husband? How did that go?
Yeah, it was I'm just going to be vulnerable here. It was very difficult when I told him that I no longer had faith in the church because there's this narrative that like, okay, well then he has really the rights to divorce me at this point because, and I was afraid that I was going to lose my marriage. I had already had a child by that point. It was so devastating to me, but I had to be honest. And he said, I need to think about it. Like, I just need to sit with that for a day or two. And so we just sit with how uncomfortable that was. And I had stopped wearing my garments by that point. And I remember I was so terrified that I was going to lose everything that I went back and put my garments on. My brain wanted so bad to go back to the last moment that things felt safe and comfortable and okay. And after a few hours, I realized that I really couldn't go back, that whatever was happening, we needed to move forward in some way. But it was so terrifying that I remember putting my garments on, just trying to cling to something when it felt like my world was falling apart. To his credit, my husband said, I married you and I'm in this for you and my love for you. He chose me in that moment. And to me, that was a much more sacred moment for our marriage than even our wedding, because that was when he really had an option to turn away from me or choose me, and he chose me. And we were able to work through a mixed faith marriage and now work through essentially a post-Mormon marriage. And to his credit, he did choose me and chose love in that situation, and we were able to navigate it. But it was very scary because I felt like I was losing everything. I was losing my job, I was losing my community, I lost my identity, I lost my meaning, my purpose, my morality, my family, my husband. So it was incredibly painful.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. I mean, maybe this isn't relevant and maybe it's not answerable either, but I mean, do you think you would have come to the same conclusions in the timetable that you have if people had listened to you, had like really sat with you and hadn't blocked you off? Do you think you would have exited in the same time and manner?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I might have been able to stay a little longer, especially if my ward had allowed me to participate with the beliefs that I had. Do you know what I mean? Like if some churches allow people like secular Judaism, for example, they allow you to participate, or there's some, forms of Catholicism where they still allow you to participate in the culture, even though you may have varying levels of belief. So I do think I might have stayed longer in the community in some way if they would have kind of allowed for varying levels of beliefs. So that might have extended my time, but I have, differing beliefs. I might have been able to sustain that longer. But the kinds of questions that I ask as a personality, where I do think I eventually would have ended up an atheist no matter what happened, but I may have had, I wish I had better relationships with my ward currently for the times that I want to show up to support a friend whose, kid is getting baptized or something like that. There are times that I wish I could participate more, where I don't feel like my presence there is something that is, really accepted.
Yeah, and I can't speak for your ward members or anything like that, but I'm sure there are other people out there who are feeling the same as you. And I know that there are like rules and parameters around like what you can or can't do based on your activity level or your beliefs or even your moral conduct, right? But I would speak for myself and say like that I would want you there as a friend, as a neighbor. And it wouldn't be authentic to me to just say like, hey, I don't care what you believe. Actually, I really do. Like, I don't think my beliefs are worth believing unless I want other people to believe with me, that they do bring me so much joy and happiness that I would want others to come. So like being completely like open about that. Yes, of course, I would love for you to come back to church. I mean, you and people in general, right? Because that's who I am and what I believe. And I would love for you to just come and feel like you can participate in the ways that you feel comfortable with and that are allowed in the parameters of what is acceptable in our church based on like faith and callings and things like that.
I appreciate that because my morality has really stayed the same. I don't drink alcohol. I don't even drink coffee. Missed whatever window you need to be able to like those things because I've been in the church for so long. I'm in a marriage. I have children. I still don't even really feel comfortable swearing half the time because it's just how I was raised. So really, as far as like more morality or my day-to-day life, I live a highly moral, highly spiritual, highly service-driven, highly truth-seeking life. And I got a lot of those things from the community that I was raised in. But I hope in the future it's able to provide something like that.
So I guess my question would be, and feel free not to answer it if you don't want to.
I'll answer anything.
And you're like me.
Yeah.
So I guess for me, like if I were going through a faith transition, and I ended up on atheism, I think, like, I guess my question is, why continue to live what you call a moral life when it doesn't, like, if you don't believe there's anything after this, that there would be no consequences there. Does that make sense? What do you
Yeah.
feel like is what you want to leave behind, and where does that
Yeah.
desire come from?
For me, why do I do that? Because we're humans and we suffer. We have a capacity for suffering. And because we can suffer more or less in this life, our actions affect other people and affect ourselves. And there is no science that shows that an immoral life will lead to a happy life. There's just no evidence of that. All science shows, all the evidence shows that living a moral life, having good relationships, being service driven, being aware of others, getting out of your own kind of selfish brain and being kind to others because you just know what it's like to be a human and be having a hard day or having a hard time. All of these things, even if I was just being selfish, I would do because it's going to lead to a much more meaningful, connected, relationship-filled, meaning-filled, purpose-filled life.
Yeah. And what you brought up about living a moral life and deciding to do that. I mean, a lot of our discussions in Relief Society and recently have kind of focused around, like, how do we feel God's love for us and how do we show our love for him? And like one of the questions was like, when have you felt God's love? And a lot of my immediate answers were like when I felt I had received blessings, that like I saw him do something for me. But recently, as I realized that about myself, I've wanted to make the shift that I feel his love, not just because he gives me things, but like I can feel his love by doing the things that I feel like he would have me do. And just to show my love, focus more on showing my love for him instead of waiting to be given A, B, and C because of what I've done. And I think,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I just love the humility that you just showed right there. That was really beautiful. And this is a place where I feel like we can meet very well, because one of the stories that changed my life the most was Lynzi. And there's this quote that says, to love another person is to see the face of God, right? And to me, some people will look at my life and say, oh, she's an atheist. She's rejected everything about Christianity or more.
Yeah.
The church. And for me, every time, one of the reasons that I don't fear, meeting God, if I were to meet God after I die and be surprised, and that would be a good surprise. One of the reasons that I don't feel fear is because I really do feel now that I'm doing what Jesus would have me do with what I have, with the beliefs that I have. And I feel Jesus very strongly in that, even if it's maybe a less supernatural Jesus than your Jesus. I still feel that good Samaritan core, that to love another person is to see the face of God core.
So that brings up, I guess, thinking about like positive aspects. Were there any positive experiences? You mentioned your husband and his beautiful acceptance of you and choosing you in that really vulnerable time. Do you have any other positive experiences with friends, family, or neighbors, ward members during that transition period that you would like to share?
Unfortunately, no. And maybe it would have been different, later on when there were things like the church essays. But when we're talking about 15 years ago, I didn't have really any positive interactions other than my husband choosing me in that moment. I really didn't have any positive reactions. And some of that, I'm going to be vulnerable about it. Some of that was that I was hurt and I was angry and I'm sending people articles, and I would not recommend people going about it the way that I did at the time. So some of that is certainly on me, but no, I wouldn't say that I had any positive interactions during that time, which is a shame. But I will say that some of my relationships just never recovered, but some of my relationships over time, especially as people became more aware of things that are in the church essays. And also when people saw that I was still I'm still me, I'm still trying to live a good life. I'm doing the best I can to do healthy spirituality with people, with the beliefs that I have. And over time, people got maybe a little bit less afraid of me. So a lot of my relationships have recovered. And even though they're active and I'm not, I have fantastic relationships now with many of my active family members and friends. But at the time, I did not. And some of that is honestly on me too, because I just kind of was exploding all of my, thoughts and emotions on people in a way that was perhaps a little bit much and maybe unfair as well. So I do regret that. I regret that for sure.
And I think like thinking about, we bring up grief. We have brought up grief in these other episodes, just like going through the different stages of it. When you lose a spouse or a loved one, or you make a major life shift like this, in the moment, it's really hard to hold space for people going through that, especially when it might feel targeting or other things like that. But I'm glad that you have this perspective now, and that like you can recognize what happened on both sides and be fair about that. I think that's so important for us to say like, all right, well, yeah. I know.
And to be fair, I don't know a post-Mormon who looks back and says, I handled that exactly the way that I wanted to handle that. I've met with now thousands of post-Mormons. Not a single one looks back and says, like, I handled that perfectly and everybody else shut me out. Like, no, like we bleed in that anger phase of grief. We often bleed onto other people in ways that are unfair, because that anger will bring up your ego to protect your identity and your own beliefs and the things that you hold sacred. And so both people are going to go away. Even people that really love each other, both people will come away from that conversation feeling hurt, because one person is a black hole in need of validation and one person is playing defense, and there's no way to connect human to human. How can we connect human to human? Because whenever we have black hole need of validation and pure defense, these people are going to come away feeling like they love each other, but that they just can't connect. And it's going to hurt both sides. It hurt both sides. It's not like I was the only one hurting. Like my husband was hurting. He was scared for what was going to happen to him. My parents were worried. They're thinking about their own parenting. Like we're all hurting. So like I don't have the monopoly of hurt, but because of that dynamic, it just means that it's very difficult to connect human to human. And I do try to help the community get better at that.
Yeah, and it's so needed. I'm wondering you said some of your relationships didn't recover. For the ones that did, what helped? Like, what was that process like?
A lot of it was on my part. There's kind of two things that I recommend. One is speaking in common language. So instead of kind of walking into a family thing and saying my beliefs about Joseph Smith or whatever, or emailing people articles, which is just not good behavior, just going in and saying something like, I'm currently not attending the church, but I really love the stories of Jesus that I was raised with. And right now I'm just spending time with some of these marginalized groups, and that's kind of how I'm practicing my Christianity now. And just doing something like that where I'm still appreciating this community. I'm not attacking something that they hold sacred. I'm using common language. I'm trying to build some common ground, can really go a long way in just getting someone to lower their defenses and not feel like you're there to attack the thing that's most sacred to them. And so for me, I think the majority of the relationships that kind of got a lot better was because I learned how to do that. I learned how to talk in a way where I'm inviting you and your humanity to show up in a very safe place, rather than like coming at you in a way that's very threatening, that's only going to force you to play defense. And so I just got a lot better at that. And then people learned that yes, our beliefs are different, but that I'm a safe person, that I didn't go post-Mormon heroin addict, that I still value them and I still value our relationship. I value their boundaries when they have boundaries with me, and I respect that. And over time, we were just able to find that human to human ground, because I did a lot of work to create that ground, but then they were also able to meet me there because they, over time, could trust that I would respect their boundaries and respect their beliefs.
Yeah, and I think it's so, I've talked to 9 of you now, and like I've learned so much, but I realize that this is a very unique environment because there's really nothing at stake in a relationship. Like I've talked to you a little bit on Instagram, these other people I've interacted with on these listen-in episodes was just, they emailed me and I said, do you want to be a part of this? And they said yes. And then I sat down, and I don't know how often I'll talk to them again, right? So there's not a lot at stake. And so I feel very privileged to be able to dip my toes into sitting and listening with people, because like things will be said, like even some things that you've said tonight, like I wholeheartedly disagree with like your view on Jesus Christ.
I'm sure.
Right? Like, and you know I do, right? But like, I'm able to set that aside and continue to listen to you because, well, it's easier probably because it's not going to continue to come up in our relationship, whatever it is going forward from here.
We're not married. And that's probably a good thing for both of us. That's probably a good thing for both of us at this point. But I am. Right. But like our goal, like off air before we got on here, was just like, can we come away feeling heard and feeling like we're creating a space in this community that we all desperately need, because every person knows someone who has left the church who probably cares about that person. And so I do, even though we do have some significant differences, and if this was a different kind of podcast, we'd be debating it. I do feel heard, and that is very meaningful what you've been able to do with that.
Well, that makes that, I feel like yours being like this final episode is actually really.
Hey, capstone is important.
Capstone.
You know? I was raised Mormon enough to know that the capstone is important.
We've got capstones and we've got keystones and we've got lots of different stones, but the way that we were interacting on Instagram before we came to this episode, like I'll be honest, like I was kind of afraid of you because of the way that you would interact with my posts. I was on guard because I was getting a lot of negativity, and maybe if I would go back and reread the things that you said, I would see it in a new light now, having sat down and talked to you computer face to face. Yeah. But like, I feel like every episode has built me up enough to be able to come here and not be afraid. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that the fear is the thing that keeps us from making these connections. And I really was just thinking about this before we got on here. And I just thought, you know what, like, Father, just let me see her for the person that she is, and trust her, and like open my heart enough, and be like anchored enough to not feel like, oh no, you know, does she have ulterior motives or anything like that?
And by the way, like, that's an incredible act of love, because we have a lot of scriptures about like love overcoming fear. And a lot of that fear is like, if I open my heart to you, you could hurt me, you know? And in this conversation, you chose to lead with love and be open to my story. And I feel incredibly heard. I feel like this is, you know, it's been a good experience for me. And, you know, I could look back at some of those Instagram posts, but my purpose on being on social media is, I don't think that I did, but if I did, I would apologize, is that I really want to separate the person from the idea. And so you as a person, like, love this, like, love your approach, love your bravery, and really choosing love when fear is showing up, and when you have you had an opportunity to not talk to me and you chose to, which is an incredibly loving act, an incredibly brave act. But yeah, when I comment on social media, I'm really careful that I'm separating the person, and I never attack people, and I never do character attacks on people. It would be incredibly hypocritical if I did, because I was Mormon for the majority of my life. It'd be incredibly hypocritical if I did. But because I hold now thousands of stories of people who have been hurt by various people, practices, and doctrines of this religion, it means that when I'm flipping tables, that, hey, how you said that idea, I just want you to hear how it's landing with people, because I know that little thing that you said, that you probably didn't notice how you said it, but I just saw 3 clients this week about this because it's really damaging their human development. And so that's what I'll continue to do on social media and in my work. I really want to challenge ideas that cause harm in the world. That does inspire change, positive change in the church. And I have many people I love in the church who do better in the church, and I want the church to get better for them. And so, yeah, my challenges on social media, I hope that I was never directly challenging you as a person, because I found what you did today to be an incredible act of love. But I do want to continue to challenge ideas that can cause harm to human development, because I hold so many stories of people who have been hurt by this particular religion. And so I hope in the future we
Yeah.
can maybe understand each other better in that way.
For sure. And we wouldn't have unless we had this conversation.
Yes,
right?
which goes to, your bravery in choosing love over fear, which I'm not taking that lightly. That's an incredible thing that I often don't get from people who are active in whatever religion I'm critiquing at the time.
Yeah, and I mean, you being willing to reach out and meet me here too is also brave, and I honor that, and I'm grateful for that. And I think it's so interesting. There's so many themes that have come up over these last, and like, of course, I'm going to be remembering all these things because this is the last one, but like all these themes that come up, a lot of things that are said in the former member community also apply in the member community, and in the way that, like, how do I want to say this? Like what you said about separating the person from the idea. I mean, this is something that has to be learned by every single person in this world, or else we're going to be experiencing like nuclear warfare like really soon.
Mm-hmm.
Because especially in our own government, our own political system, and in our church, or in relationships between members and former members, what I'm realizing is the way that I work with this cognitive dissonance and like hearing people's stories and meeting them where they're at and believing them is that like I can separate the ideas that they have from themselves. And even like moving it a little bit, like step outwards a tiny bit, being able to believe that that was their experience. Like I truly believe you experienced what you said you did.
Yeah. And I truly believe that people come by their beliefs honestly. And I believe that too. And a scary statistic that we can share here is I just saw a couple weeks ago an article that said that they did a study and that said that 50% of people believe that people on the opposite side of the political aisle, whatever that is, are fundamentally evil or less human in some way, which is like
true.
that's terrifying. And so we are getting to a place religiously and politically where we're starting to lose that these are honest people. They come by their beliefs honestly, and that there are people underneath these religions, underneath your political beliefs, underneath your political core values. And we are losing that. And I do think this conversation is your way of combating that. And I just really have to praise you for that.
Yeah, because the more we just only listen to the people who are exactly like us, the easier it is to vilify the other side or whatever.
And that happens on both sides. Sides. Yeah, the post-Mormon community isn't much better at that than the active Mormon community in seeing that these are people underneath their beliefs and acting as if they're human people, trying their best, and in their anger, often that part is lost in the post-Mormon community too, sometimes even worse because there's that anger aspect. And so they forget that these are
the
people.
Humanity.
Yeah, the humanity of it, absolutely. And I call that out where I can on kind of my side of that aisle.
Yeah, and it's so difficult, but I really just believe that we've got to do it. And that even like my own experience, that I believe it's rooted in truth, and that like I believe in my own experience, and I also believe that God has the true understanding of what has happened to each of us and what is like what could have gone wrong here or could have been better here, even for myself. And so just for any members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints who are listening, there is a way without doing mental gymnastics, and we hear that word a lot, or
that was more talking about what I did, because I did apologetics for the church, and I was doing seminary, so I was really doing a lot of that. So that was an attack on you. That was me. Yeah, that was me doing that. That's totally
fine. But I get, not just you, I get that told to me all the time online. It's just like, oh, it's just a bunch of mental gymnastics. But like, I really have come to a place where I can honor and accept others who believe differently than me without feeling like I have to justify or shield or make a bunch of excuses. And I would just invite anybody, member, former member alike, to do this journey. Go on this journey and find people who mean a lot to you and do the soul work necessary to dig down deep into what you feel is right and true. Dig down deep into that, and at the same time, open your arms wide and don't be afraid. There's no need to be afraid of this. I'm not leaving these 9 conversations like, oh my goodness, I don't have a testimony anymore because look at these beautiful people, and if they don't have a testimony, then maybe I shouldn't either. That's not what happened. I was actually able to make it through 9 conversations, and it's like 9, right? It's 9, but it's possible for you as a former member to stay a former member if that's what you're hoping for, and to also open your heart and listen to members, and for members to stay a member, active, faithful, believing member, and also utilize Christ's like atonement and amazing power to open your heart and hear. And I think just listening to you today and being here with you is just like the perfect way to describe that and to show that like even though we're totally different, and I almost like this line between us on the screen, it's almost like you are on the other side of what I'm trying to do. Like we have but kind of like the same mission.
We're fighting for the same place, because I'm screaming at my side of this line that we need to stop converting each other, because the post-Mormon community is especially bad at saying it's now my job to make sure you know everything that I know about your religion, and I'm going to send you all these articles, and it's just damaging so many relationships, and a lot of that is coming from my side of the aisle, and so I'm a part of that, this ground that we're trying to create together kind of from the other side. But I just want to reiterate that invitation that you just made, that if someone, like this is where I'll get emotional here, but if a single person in my life, family member, bishop, somebody in leadership with me, anybody had just sat down with me and just asked me to share my experience, and I wouldn't have, had a mission to change their mind. I wouldn't have had a mission that you needed to leave the church with me. But there was not a single person who would just sit down with me and listen to my concerns about polygamy, who would just sit down with me and listen to my concerns about things that I was learning in some of the books that I'm reading. And I know that it's scary and I know it feels dangerous, but if one person would have done that, it would have drastically changed my experience with deconstruction and drastically changed my ability to be able to participate in this community in a healthy way rather than a hurt, angry way, if just one person would have showed up. And so I just want to just kind of add my testimony to your invitation there, that it makes a huge difference, because the person going through it doesn't understand why people that they've spent their entire life with all of a sudden now don't want to talk to you. And I understand it now, but I didn't understand it then.
Yeah, we can do this. We can do it. That is beautiful. Thank you for being willing to share. This is going to bring us to our hope statement. What do you hope for most in the relationships between members and former members?
I wish that active members would understand that I didn't leave the church because I abandoned morality and truth. It's because I sought those things. And it led me to a different conclusion. It led me to a different place, but it was still very much driven by the concepts of virtue and morality and truth. Sometimes the narrative is that, we've rejected truth, or we want to sin, or we didn't want to learn, or these kinds of things. And I've just not found that to be true. And then from the other side, I wish that more former members would remember that even if the church is doing things that you disagree with, it does not mean that people who choose to show up for their community multiple times a week are bad people. And sometimes we get that narrative from that side of the aisle, that if you are a Mormon, you are then automatically, without me hearing your story, supporting something evil, or you're a bad person, or you're an ignorant person, or you're, whatever the narrative is. And I just wish, like you said, this idea of people come by their beliefs honestly. I see incredible people doing incredible good inside the church, really showing up with true love and service and compassion. And also, I see people who left because of truth and service and compassion. And so if we could see that there's still a human trying to do the best that they can underneath the different places that they've ended up on the faith spectrum, I think that would go a long way for both sides.
Britt, thank you so much for your time and your willingness to share and working with me through our complicated relationship.
We do have a complicated relationship, but I look forward to hopefully continuing the conversation a little bit on social media, with now a little bit more of an understanding of each other, and so I hope that's more. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I look forward to that.
Yeah, and thank you for being willing to come on and give this show a shot. I know that Some people emailed me and were like, I don't know, like this kind of seems like a trap. Like you're not going to know if it's a trap or not until you came. So I'm grateful for that trust you put in me and coming here today and sharing your heart with us. Thank you so much. And that ends my Listen In series. I hope you guys enjoyed this ride that we've been on. And man, is it interesting? Is it difficult? Is it helpful? Is it hopeful? I received an email from a woman who was asking for my resource of 5 questions to ask your loved ones who have left. And I emailed it back to her. I gave her the resource and she said, thank you so much. We sat down with my daughter and son-in-law the other night and we had a really good conversation. I was glad to have been tutored a little bit in the questions to say and how to show up with love. And that email was the whole point of this podcast. Like that made me feel like, okay, the hours that I spent, the time that I have worked through my own beliefs and made sure that I was staying where I wanted to stay while also holding space for people who believe differently from me. Like all of it was worth it because of that one email that said like, this helped. And so if this has been helpful to you at all, listening to these stories, if it's given you new perspective or helped you approach a loved one that has left, I'd love to hear about it. It makes my day. Email me at whistaypodcast@gmail.com and I'd love to hear your story if you're willing to share. And maybe you'd be willing to take these episodes and share them with the world. If you found one that was most impactful to you, share it to your social media. Let other people know what you've learned by listening in to conversations with former members and what you're going to do moving forward to help build bridges across these communities where there's a lot of hurt and pain and fear, and it doesn't need to be there. It doesn't need to be that way. I found that with Jesus Christ, all things are possible, and this is just one of those things that he can help heal us if we let him. Thank you guys for being here. If you'd like to see those resources I mentioned, they're down below. Click the link, or it's probably not even a link right now. Email me and I'll email it back to you because that's how low-key I am right now. But thank you guys for being here for this Listen In podcast, and I'd love to hear from you if this was meaningful to you in any way. Well, hopefully we'll see you in for some Why I Stay episodes as well. So we'll see you back here on the YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe. Leave a comment down below what episode has been your favorite and why, and we can't wait to continue the conversation. All right, guys, love you much love, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for listening in with us.